Welcome to Rewired Sober, the podcast that tells the truth about why women drink and what it actually takes to stop. Spoiler alert, it's not a character flaw. It's your conditioning and the roles you were handed long before you ever picked up a drink. I'm your host, Kate Vitella. I have been an RN for well over 2 decades. I'm addiction trained, a psychiatric nurse, and a sobriety coach. And this is where we do science and soul work of a woman's recovery. So you can stop white knuckling this shit and actually start trusting yourself. I am a raging feminist, a fashion lover, and I swear a lot. So if that's for you, buckle up, let's go. Welcome back to Rewired Sober. I'm your host, Kate Vitella. Duh. This is another solo episode. I want to start with something that might feel a little bit uncomfortable. Spoiler alert, all my episodes might feel a little uncomfortable. But what if the way that you are introducing yourself is keeping you stuck? Now, this is a question I had to ask myself when I decided to leave 12-step recovery spaces. Now, just hear me out here. What if the very first words you say about who you are reinforcing the very identity you're trying to move beyond? Because now, in a lot of recovery spaces, we're taught to lead with, "Hi, I'm Kate. I'm an alcoholic." And so I've been doing a lot of exploring, and I want to talk about that today. Not from a place of judgment. Y'all know I'm deprogramming AA, but I'm also not here to slam it. I'm here to talk about this from a place of curiosity because I decided to investigate what if there's another way. Now, when I recently joined as a She Recovers coach, one of the guiding principles stuck out to me as sort of like the impetus of all of this change and evolution in my recovery and how I identify. One of the guiding principles is we focus on our strengths, not our defects. Not our defects. This is how people change. And after I said that to myself a few times and let it land, I was really thinking about, wow, this is not to deny our past, not to bypass reality, but to lead with a strength. And there's a radically different orientation here because this asks, who are you becoming? And what is good and right and true about you now? And what's working? Instead of what's wrong with you, what's broken, what's fucked up, what needs to be fixed. Like leading with your biggest flaw. And listen, for some women, saying I'm an alcoholic feels really grounding and honest and life-saving. And there was a time it did for me too, when saying it out loud was the most honest thing I had ever done. There was a time. Now, saying it for the rest of my life, not so much. I don't say that anymore. But I've also noticed for other people on a very different end, saying I'm an alcoholic, it can become a loop. It can become an identity that gets rehearsed over and over and over again. So I want to talk about the science of words and identity. I always got to bring in a little neuroscience, but not like woo-woo stuff, like neuroplasticity. Okay, your brain is constantly listening to you. The words you repeat will shape your thoughts. And then those thoughts will shape your beliefs, and your beliefs will shape your behavior. That is how our identity gets wired. I've said that a million times in a million different ways on this podcast. There's this concept in neuroscience, neurons that fire together, wire together. So when you repeatedly say, I am this, your brain goes, okay, got it. This is who we are. Let's build around that. And it will strengthen that neural pathway. Not because it's necessarily true, because it's repeated. See, your brain doesn't fact check you. It just patterns you. That's why this whole podcast is called Rewired Sober, because we are repatterning the way we think about recovery. So then the real question becomes, do you want your identity to be fixed or evolving? And for me, I always want to be evolving. One of the things I am most proud about myself is that I lead with that I'm a student always of personal development, of human nature, of the world, that I always want to be growing. I think about those memes that say, like, if you cringe hard looking at a past version of yourself, well, that's good. That means you grew. And I'd be cringing hard. But I feel like when you say, I was someone who struggled with alcohol in the past versus I am currently an alcoholic, those land really differently in your body. When I introduce myself now, I will say I'm in recovery, or I used to struggle with alcohol. But even the word I'm in recovery can make me kind of feel like I'm constantly working toward a thing, when in reality, I don't have to think anymore about not drinking. It's just who I am. So even these days, I'm less likely to say I'm in recovery, because I've sort of rewired my brain and repatterned into a completely different human. Now, I'm okay talking about being, quote, in recovery, because it's very inclusive of many, many things. I'm in recovery from disordered eating, perfectionism, codependency, mental health struggles, right? I have no problem. But calling myself an alcoholic, like I said, I just feel like that lands so differently. When I say I was someone who, in the past, one creates space. And when I say I'm an alcoholic, that locks it in. And listen, I'm not here to tell you what to say, right? I'm just here to say that your words are going to matter more than you think. There's so much power in the spoken word and the words that we say to ourselves. And there is something really ancient about speaking things out loud. Because before we had neuroscience, we had people, women, who understood the power of language on a soul level. And I've talked about this before. I often pull an oracle card from Megan Watterson's deck of the Divine Feminine Oracle, and she calls it a spiritual tool to hone your intuition. Now, I love this. And like I've said in the past, if I ever could imagine myself sitting around with an oracle card, I would be like, hell no, but I'm loving it. It's part of my morning ritual. And what I really love about this particular deck is it encompasses all spiritual leaders, women, all religious practices all over the world, all cultures, right? Some examples, the Hindu goddess Kali, or the goddess Isis, or Our Lady of Guadalupe, the goddess Saraswati, the goddess of self-knowledge, or Kuan Yin, the goddess of compassion. You get the point. Lots and lots of different options to identify with. And the other day, I pulled a card, and it was, I think it's pronounced Lala Shwari. I think it's Lala for short, which is funny because that's what I call my sister Laura. But Lala was a mystic and a poet and a woman who, like, quite literally walked away from everything that confined her. And she spoke her truth into existence. And her teachings weren't quiet. They were like really bold, especially for the time. They were very embodied. They were out loud. And Lala believed that truth lived in expression. So what she really believed was that what you speak becomes, you bring it into reality. So I pull this card, and I'm thinking a lot about the bridge between science and soul. You know, that's kind of the way my brain works. And what was interesting to me is what I felt like Lala was expressing spiritually. We can now understand sort of neurologically. We can understand this from a neuroscience perspective. When you speak, you activate the language centers in your brain, and you actually reinforce neural pathways. You create an internal alignment or misalignment, depending on what you're saying, but you create internal alignment, and your brain is always asking, like, is this who we are? Is this what we're doing? And your words will answer that question over and over and over again. So I find there to be a big problem with leading with the wound, right? Leading with the parts of yourself you're the least proud of. When you lead with, your worst moments, your lowest identity, your most painful labels. I feel like you're not just sharing your past self, you're sort of rehearsing it over and over. You're keeping it active. And this is one of the 8 million reasons why I don't call myself an alcoholic. It's not just deprogramming the rooms of AA. I feel like there's a real science here. So, and it's not always bad to keep something rehearsed and active, but you have to question what you're telling yourself. It's always worth questioning. It's always worth leaning in to, the curiosity. Because what if what you said instead was, I am a woman in recovery. I'm a woman in long-term recovery, short-term, whatever. I am a woman who no longer drinks alcohol. I am a woman learning to fucking trust myself. I'm rebuilding my life in a way that actually works for me. I mean, you can feel the difference versus I'm a woman who's an alcoholic. And what I'm saying is when you're talking about rebuilding and leading with strength, it's not denial. It's just a different direction. One of my favorite quotes is by spiritual leader Danielle Laporte. And she says, "You are not the wound. You are the healer." In other words, quit identifying as the fucking wound. Start embracing the power that you have to heal yourself, to have the answers within you. When I work with a client, one thing I always say is, you have all the answers within you. I am not your guru. I'm not your bodhisattva. I'm not here to impart all my wild wisdom on you. Now, certainly ask me a question about neuroscience and addiction, and I'm happy to answer. If you ask me about my personal self, I'm happy to answer. But I strongly believe that my clients have the answers to all their questions inside of them. They just need to access it. And that's what we do in the work together. I really want women to become the author of their story. And you are not just the character in your story. You see, you're the fucking author. And authors get to decide what gets emphasized, what gets replaced, what narrative arc becomes. So if you keep telling yourself the same story, your brain will keep living it. But when you shift the language, you create new pathways, new possibilities, and a new identity. So it's not just fluffy, like your thoughts become your reality. I want to break this down even further. And I hope this doesn't sound really like Pinteresty, but your thoughts will create emotional states that influence your behaviors and shape your outcomes. And repeated over time, that becomes your reality. So when people say your thoughts create your reality, they don't mean you can manifest a super yacht by journaling or something. What that means is that your internal narrative determines how you show up in your life. And that really changes everything. When I realized the things I was telling myself was affecting my thoughts, behaviors, and actions, wow, that was an eye-opener for me. And there's a bit of confirmation bias here. When you tell yourself something, your brain will look for evidence to support it. I'm a piece of shit. I'm overweight. I'm ugly. I'm worthless. Your brain will constantly be scanning your environment for clues that this is true. And on repeat, it will become an internal pattern, a narrative, and the way that you move through the world. So how do we work toward rebuilding our identity, especially in midlife, as women, in sobriety? So I put together a list of 7 little pointers. I like a list, right? I like to take notes. It helps me feel a little bit more cohesive. So how do you find your identity sober in midlife as a woman? First, let's just say this out loud. Finding your identity is not like this cute little Pinterest journey. It's not a fucking mood board. It's more like a full-blown identity demolition followed by this slow, intentional rebuild. And honestly, that's where your power is. So here's how this actually works in 7 pointers. No fluff, no bullshit Pinterest quotes. Number 1, you stop outsourcing who you are. For the duration of your womanhood, drinking time, child rearing, momming, wifing, whatever the fuck, alcohol did a lot of heavy lifting for you, and you can't deny that. It decided how social you were. It softened your edges. It gave you like a personality on demand. And you take all that away, and suddenly it's like, who the hell am I at a dinner party or an event? But that's a good thing. That discomfort, that's your data. And instead of numbing it, you're going to start asking yourself, what do I actually like? Like, what feels like me truly deep inside versus what feels performative? And where have I been shape-shifting, morphing, molding to fit in? And I feel like when you stop outsourcing who you are, this is where your identity starts. Not by adding, but by like pulling stuff away. They say, even if you don't exactly know who you are or what you want, a really good place to start is knowing what you don't want. And so knowing what feels like you versus performative or performance is a good place to start. Okay, number 2, it's okay. I've said this a million times. It's okay if you grieve your old self, like even the fucking messy one. And people skip this part and then they wonder why they feel stuck. But you're not just quitting drinking, you're letting go of identities, the fun one, the cool one, and you're letting go of a lot of chaos and essentially coping mechanisms that worked at the time until they didn't. There can be real grief there and real anger. I've done entire podcast episodes on grieving old identities and anger, but there's also real relief. And all of it belongs together into this patchwork. I feel like midlife women especially have been conditioned to push past this part, move on, stay grateful, don't make it a thing, right? But I think the take-home point of number 2 is make it a thing. This is a death and rebirth. It's okay to slow down, take time, and grieve your old self. Don't skip this part. It's okay. Make it a fucking thing. Okay, moving on to number 3. Let's get radically honest about what's not working. Often the metaphor is used that sobriety for midlife women is like turning on the lights in a house you built and you've been living in for 20 years. And you're walking around this house and it's like, oh, wow, I hate this room and this room. I hate this wallpaper. Maybe you don't even like some of the people in the rooms. Maybe you don't even like who you are. Maybe you don't like the people in your own house. And that's okay. This is where boundaries get real. And you get to do that fun work of examining your anger and your resentments, like the whole fucking picture, because you're going to stop tolerating a lot of things. And getting radically honest will help you start to build your identity on a truth and not a tolerance. Number 4, and I got to go here. You rebuild your nervous system before your personality. I love to talk about this because I feel like we spend a lot of time talking about becoming a different person, but there's this nervous system element about it. You don't find yourself by thinking your way into a new version. You don't think harder. There's a part of you that has to find yourself by stabilizing your body and your nervous system enough to feel yourself. So little things like blood sugar regulation, eat like a grown woman, not like the hangover queen, and sleep, always non-negotiable. I don't care how busy you are, you got to sleep. And movement, move your body. It's not punishment, it's regulation. You're going to be reducing chaos and overstimulation because a dysregulated brain will always reach for the old identity. And a regulated nervous system can create a new one. So that one is really important. Moving on to number 5. It's okay to experiment like you're 25 again, except with higher standards. And this is what I think is fun and creative about rebuilding your identity. So don't think of yourself as stuck right now because you're really actually wide open and you get to try new things. I've talked a lot in the past episodes about fashion. Dopamine dressing is a real thing. You get to try new foods, new non-alcoholic beverages, new friend groups, new creative outlets. I highly encourage people to try new things and say out loud what you actually think. Like, shocking, I know, but do it. This is where you get to own who you are. And here's the key about this. It's discernment, right? We're seeking discernment over approval. Because at midlife, we're not asking anymore, like, does everyone like me? We're asking ourselves the radical question, do I like this? Do I feel at home? Is this fun, interesting, satiating for me? And that's where you rebuild identity. Number 6, we talk a lot in this podcast about rebuilding self-trust. And honestly, this can be in really small, lame-ass, boring ways. It's not always the sexiest, but it is the backbone. Your identity is built on evidence. It's not just this vibe you're going to create. You know, every time you say that you're not going to drink and you don't, you know, you stack that evidence. Every time you tell the truth instead of performing, or you trust your intuition, you rest when you need to, or you follow through, right? You build evidence, and that's how you build your identity. You're telling your brain, this is who we are now. That repetition, that's neuroplasticity doing its thing. So, okay, number 7, and then I'll be done with this list. Let it all be messy and evolving and unhinged. I mean, this whole podcast is about messy action, and nothing about midlife sobriety is about becoming a perfectly healed version of yourself in white linen pants. It's about becoming honest and trusting your own inner authority, being self-led and emotionally literate. And sometimes that comes with being loud. Like I've talked about, sometimes that comes with anger, being free. You might surprise yourself. Actually, you should. You should surprise yourself, because the truth that no one tells you is you're not going to stumble across your identity. You're going to build it choice by choice, boundary by boundary, fucking outfit by outfit, hairstyle, conversation, lipstick by lipstick. And yeah, some days you're going to feel awesome and confident and grounded. And then there's going to be days when you feel like a teenager again in a grown woman's body. Like, what the hell are we doing? And both of these feelings and reactions are part of the journey, and let it be as messy as it is. But the take home point here, I think, is about your identity is that your internal narrative will really determine how you show up in your life. So I guess what I'll leave you with is I want you to play with this, not force it or fake it. Just sort of notice, what words do you use to describe yourself? Are those words expanding you, or are they keeping you really small? Because you don't have to deny your past. You don't have to deny that you struggled with alcohol or food or gambling, but you also don't have to live there forever. So I hope this episode encourages you. And if this resonates with you, this idea of identity and language and rewiring, this is the core of the work I do with women. We're not just talking about quitting alcohol, but we're talking about becoming someone new on the other side. So there's a link in the show notes if you want to explore that. I will always be your champion. You're fucking allowed to change your story. You are allowed to speak differently about yourself, and you're allowed to become someone new. And I just want to encourage you, the words that you choose, even the ones inside, they're shaping you. So take very, very good care of that brave heart of yours. And thanks for hanging out. All right, that's what I got for you today. If this hits, send it to a woman who needs to hear this shit, because we are not doing this alone. You can find me on Instagram and pretty much all the socials at Rewired Sober. The links are in my show notes if you want to work with me one-on-one and go deeper. I love you, mean it, take care of yourself, and I'll catch you on the next one.